Here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Tunnel Vision, a show brought to you by USCFootball.com. I'm your host, Keely, joined by Ryan Abraham and Shotgun Spratling. We have a lot to talk about today. I know sometimes in the offseason, people are like, what do you talk about on Tunnel Vision? Well, we have a lot. A lot has gone down in the last week for USC. We're going to talk about a commit that USC picked up, a 5-star. So we'll talk about what that means for USC's recruiting class. They also had a decommitment, so we'll get into that. We'll give you the latest on USC search for offensive line coach, what we're hearing on that, and then more coaching movement. John David Baker, USC's tight ends coach, there's a report that he will be moving on, so we'll get into that. And you want to hear Ryan talk about Larry Scott. Larry Scott and the Pac-12 are parting ways, so we'll get into that. Isaiah Pola-Mao.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, yes. Not going bye-bye is Isaiah Pola-Mao. He's coming back for 2021. And then if we have time, if it's not 9 p.m. by the time we get through that, we can also maybe have a basketball minute. Shotgun, I know you are ready for one. I know Ryan is not, but we might get into that. But like I said, guys, we have a lot to talk about. I believe we are live on all 3 platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. We are monitoring your comments, put your comments, questions, and concerns. We'll be sure to do our best to answer them. And like always, you can tweet at us, #TunnelVision. I'll put your tweet up on the screen. Then you can also call us 512-4TUNNEL. Our intern Micah is standing by to talk to y'all and screen your questions. We love talking to you guys. But like I said, guys.
Hey, shout out to Periscope. We got like 100 people already on Periscope. Thanks. And Periscope's going away in like a couple months or something. Yeah, I'm so sad. But we're figured out if we can do the Twitter live thing. But thanks for being on the Periscope, people.
Yeah.
I'm watching your comments.
Yeah, that's Ryan's domain over there. So make sure you give him some grief on Periscope. But like I said, guys, a lot to talk about. Let's first start off with USC picking up a big commitment over the weekend. 2022 5-star composite quarterback Domani Jackson. I guess first off, Shotgun, what does this mean for USC and who are they getting in Domani?
Another, high-end cornerback. This is another guy that USC, the one area where they've really done well is keeping those local cornerbacks home over the last pretty much decade. When they have those high-end guys, whether it be Adoree Jackson or Iman Marshall, even Jack Jones initially being at USC. Domani Jackson is another guy that fits in that mold. The number 1 cornerback in the class right now in the 2022 class. Modern day kid, so you keep that pipeline going as well. Miller Moss was there briefly, but you're looking at Rajon Davis as a guy they're trying to finish with the 2021 class. Kyron Ware-Hudson, another modern day guy, to go along with the Amon-Ra St. Browns and JT Daniels and those guys. So, you're keeping that pipeline going, but you get a big, physical, fast cornerback. He has all the attributes you could want from an NFL cornerback right now. Does he have the technique? Does he have all the things down to be an NFL guy now? No, I'm not saying that. But he has the size, speed, and ability that you're looking for. You just got to be able to coach that up. And, he's a guy that can get handsy at times, but he's not quite as grabby as some of the West Coast cornerbacks normally are because he can use his frame, his body, but also his speed that he doesn't have to be the same way. So he's a little bit different than some of the other guys. He's a little bit of a combination of an Adoree Jackson with the speed-wise, with the size of an Iman Marshall. Now, I'm not saying that he's as good as either one of those guys coming out of high school. He still has a year. He's still just a junior. But he has that rare combination of size and speed that you really look for if you're a defensive back coach. And again, Dante Williams going and locking up one of the top players in Southern California for the second class in a row, even though the 2021 class is not completed yet.
Yeah, I was about to say, Ryan, we talk about USC's mantra of taking back the West. They've signed Corey Foreman, who was the number 1 player in California for the 2021 class. And now 2022, Domani Jackson is the number 1 player in California. He just commits to USC. What does that mean about USC's recruiting ability and what they're building?
Well, I mean, you have to have good recruiters on your staff. there's always the argument, does USC recruit itself? I mean, there's a lot of factors that help USC recruit when things are up, then they're down, whatever. Having all that tradition, all of that helps. But if you have tireless, relentless recruiters like Dante Williams on the staff, that certainly helps things. And this has his fingerprints all over it. It's it's a great get for USC. Seeing Oregon get the top players in California for a couple years in a row certainly isn't something that makes USC fans feel good. That's part of the whole take back the West thing. You get Corey Foreman a few weeks ago, and now you get Domani Jackson. I mean, it's a big deal, and I feel like it's important for USC to be there. But he's from Mater Dei. He's a 5-star corner. Like, those are the kind of guys that should just be at USC. And for years, it didn't matter who the coach was. Pete Carroll kind of started things going, and you had, Lane Kiffin would do it, and Steve Sarkisian would do it. Those guys would just end up at USC. And even earlier on in Clay Helton's tenure, and in a couple of years, that dropped off. And these were like USC type of guys. He is one. Corey Foreman is one. So it's sort of like, if you send your kid to school and they come back, you're like, oh, he ate his lunch, he went to all his classes and stuff. Oh, that's great. But that's kind of what you're supposed to do. So, it's a big deal to get a 5-star player like that, but it's sort of what USC is supposed to do. So it's good for USC to get back on track and do things the way they should be, because they do have all of those advantages. And getting that 5-star kid from Mater Dei, you're like the Amon-Ra St. Browns of the world. Like, you need to be able to back. A couple of years they took off of that. Now it looks like they're back getting those guys. Obviously not signed yet, but it's a big deal, but something USC should definitely be doing.
Yeah. Now, Domani talked to Greg Biggins about why he decided to commit to USC. And one of the things that stood out to me was he said that he wanted to commit early so he can start building the 2022 class. Shotgun, what does that say about what USC is, the momentum they have on the recruiting trail in that sense?
It says that they're definitely moving in the right direction, and that you have a leader. When you can get that 5-star guy early and he wants to be the guy to lead and say, everyone come, because players, high school players, they gravitate towards those stars. It's the same thing that you see in all kind of forms of walks of life. And if you have that main guy that can be your recruiter, can say, hey, I'm the one going to lead the charge, you want to come join me and play with me. You already see it with USC, is recruiting 5-star cornerback Will Johnson out of Michigan. He and Domani Jackson have a good relationship already. USC, this week, Vic Soto and Dante Williams were back at it again in the Southeast, throwing out some offers to the number 1 cornerback in the 2023 class, another player from Georgia, that was a kid from Alabama. There's another cornerback from Georgia that got an offer that's one of the top 2023 cornerbacks. There's a couple of defensive linemen from Alabama and Louisiana that Vic Soto's given offers to. So they're not stopping and saying, whew, we got Corey Foreman, good, this class is done. Whew, we got Domani Jackson, this class is done. No, they're continuing to build momentum. You see that USC is locking up the top players in Southern California. Now you use that momentum to start going to a national scale and able to pull in guys like a Will Johnson, a 5-star guy from Michigan. That's what USC did so well under Pete Carroll. These guys play with each other in these 7-on-7 tournaments and different things, or these different events, these Under Armour camps and whatnot. And they get to know each other and like, yeah, it would be fun to play with that guy. My style really blends well with his, and different things like that. So, but you have to start with something, and Corey Foreman was a great place to start. Starting with him and saying, okay, USC serious again about recruiting, and USC serious about being a destination. Now other players start gravitating towards that.
Mm-hmm. Now, we can circle back to Domani if we want to, but before he committed, USC actually had a decommitment. Now, I'm going to botch the name, so apologies in advance, but it was 4-star linebacker Nuafi Tuihalamaka. He decommitted. I know he talked to Greg Biggins. I think the article came out today about why he decommitted. It seems like his recruitment, he wanted to open it again. An offer from Notre Dame kind of swayed him in that sense. What did you pick up from that, Shotgun?
I think it's interesting because when Junior, as everyone knows him as, Junior Tuihalamaka, he's a guy from Bishop Alemany. So Miller Moss was there. You got Jalen Smith. I remember when, before Miller Moss had committed and Junior had committed, I asked him, about the commitment. He said, well, everybody kind of knew that he was going to commit to USC. He's always been a USC fan and stuff. So this is not one where it's like, okay, USC's now out of the running. I think they'll still be in the mix for this. I think he just kind of reevaluated and saw some more offers coming in. Like, And now he says, I want to go through the process, and especially if visits finally open up in April, it looks like the plan will be now for the NCAA, for the dead period to finally end and players to be able to go take some visits. Hey, go around the country and see if you fit somewhere else better. But he's still grew up a USC fan, family is USC fans, so USC will definitely still be in the mix for this one.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, Ryan, is this something that USC fans should be concerned about, or is this just a case of recruiting is recruiting and we'll see what happens later down the road?
It's a pandemic recruiting thing, but having Jalen Smith and Miller Moss both being close with them, there was a little, it's been committed for almost a year now, so it was a little thing like, oh, that's an interesting one. That's one that you wouldn't expect, but you see things maybe potentially start to open up with the vaccine, and you get some opportunities to take visits. Plus, he knows those guys, and they didn't get to do the kind of recruiting that they would like to do. They didn't get to play. Those guys didn't get to play their senior year. Junior missed out on his junior year, and you would like to maybe, hey, I'll get to play this year. They didn't have their spring football season like the CIF talked about before. That was canceled. Maybe you get to play in the fall. Maybe you get to go take some visits. So makes sense. But that was definitely a kid I wasn't expecting you to have a decommit from, but wouldn't be shocked come December if he ends up signing with USC.
Mm-hmm. Now, just to circle back to recruiting on the whole, Shock and I know our mentions get tagged a lot, so I see what we get asked a lot, and it's, why isn't USC recruiting big O linemen and blah, blah, blah. And we actually forgot the topic because they picked up a wide receiver out of the transfer portal in KD Nixon this week.
Oh, yes. Forgot about that
so
one.
much to talk about. And I know that came up with KD Nixon is, why are they getting a wide receiver? They have so many guys, but technically don't. But as far as who USC is picking up as commits, are you worried about at all the type of player, the position that they're getting?
I mean, Ryan, if you want to touch on this, because I'd probably go on a rant.
Well, so who's USC's offensive line coach right now? We're going to talk about that, but there's no one officially hired. So I think it's not one of those things where today is what your class is going to look like. You got to pick up those players that are going to help build the class. Getting a 5-star early in the process is a big deal. That cornerback could lead to more offensive line commits down the road. A lot of times it's a quarterback that's sort of leading the charge in recruiting, but when you get, like Shotgun talked about, you get a 5-star in there, it makes a big deal. If Corey Foreman had committed a year earlier, he's working on the recruiting class. If you remember Bryce Young, another 5-star from Mater Dei, he was relentless trying to recruit kids, and it wasn't working. Like part of the decommitting reason was, man, he was trying to recruit kids. He's the 5-star quarterback. It's USC come, and no one was coming. That was ended up being a really bad class for USC, and that was coming off the 5-7 season, and everything was down. So yeah, I think it's important, but you can't look at it like they got a cornerback commit today. That means they're not getting an offensive lineman tomorrow. I don't think you can look at it that way.
Yeah, and in that sense, Shotgun, the reason I was talking about this is because I feel like some of the USC fan take is so many defensive backs. When are we going to get what USC fans need? You know what I mean? What is your take to that?
This is one of my biggest pet peeves is like a class can't be all offensive linemen. I don't know if you guys know this, but if USC had 85 scholarship offensive linemen, that wouldn't be a very good football team. In case you're wondering. And now they would be better on the offensive line. Eventually they would find someone in that 85 mix that could play those 5 spots. However, that's not the case. You've got to have positional depth across the board, and that's one of the things that they're building with the wide receivers. They get Katie Nixon, and people were asking, why would they want to transfer? Well, this guy's really good. He was really good, especially with Laviska Shenault, playing side by side in Colorado when those two were together. You can move him around, do some different things with him. But why do you want to get a receiver? Well, because you finished the year and you had 5 guys that were returning, that were healthy. Well, one of those guys was playing DB the final game too. So you really had 4 guys that were healthy that are going to be back on the roster this year. Maybe Kyle Ford comes back. Maybe Munir McClain is healthy. Those are still question marks. So you might have a little bit more depth there, and you bring in some young guys, but you just don't have many bodies there. And there's 3 or 4 of those guys on the field every single play. Whereas offensive linemen, USC currently has 13 to 15 of those guys. They have some depth there as far as bodies. Now the question is talent. Do you have talented depth? And that's been the big question. And, is it, are they going to have enough talent for the fit for the offense? That's a big question. But as far as just bodies, they have those. Now, that was a big question mark 2 years ago, and that's why they went out and got 6 guys in that class, the 2020 class, because they had missed out the previous couple classes on signing some big-name guys, and they didn't fill in with some lower-ranked guys. So You have to have balance at all times. You can't just have a complete roster of DBs. You can't have a complete roster of offensive linemen. Neither one will work to have a successful team unless you're playing 7-on-7. Then give me the DB roster, and we'll have a good flag football team. But it won't be the same. So you have to have both. Why are they not going after offensive linemen right now? Why are they going after cornerbacks in the 2023 class? Well, Dante Williams is already locking up 2022, so he's moving on to 2023. That's what you're supposed to do. Why are they not going after offensive linemen? They don't have a coach. What's that offensive lineman going to be like? Thanks for the offer, Gavin. I appreciate the offer from you, but are you going to be my position coach? No. So you need that position coach to come in and be like, yeah, this is a guy. I definitely want this guy. We want him on our board. Put him up there. Let's give him an offer, that type of thing. So it's a work in progress. It's not something, if they get a commitment from a 5-star cornerback, that's not a bad thing. Yeah. It's okay, guys. It's not a bad thing. But some people are just like, this is not an offensive lineman. Well, that's the area where we're struggling at. It can't be any good if it's not an offensive lineman. Yeah.
And to be clear, that's the internet take voice. It's not really a shot at USC fans because I know we got some comments. That was just my internet disgruntled voice. But speaking of offensive line coach, it came out this week. I believe Bruce Feldman was the first to report that Texas State's Clay McGuire is set to become USC's next offensive line coach. That hasn't been officially announced yet. I know we put in the war room that that is expected to be the hire. They just have to get through things to make that official. Ryan, I know we talked about this on the Parasol podcast, but what are your thoughts now that you've had a couple days to process about this hire that we're expecting?
Yeah, it's interesting. I really felt like USC was going to get somebody from that air raid tree, not even just like a spread, but really someone that had air raid experience. If you looked at our hot board, just had a lot of guys that did that. If you had a connection to Hal Mummy or Mike Leach, Cliff Kingsbury, Graham Harrell, and guys like that. And he's got, connections to a bunch of those guys, Lincoln Riley and stuff. The fact that he was at, Texas State is going to raise eyebrows. I don't think optically it's an ideal hire as far as looking at it where people are going like, oh, it's a Texas State guy. It was, Western Kentucky, people are going to get mad at that kind of stuff. But, you look at the resume, there's definitely some good stuff there, and there's some questionable stuff there. But having 10 years really with Mike Leach. Certainly there was a connection with Graham Harrell, being on staff at Texas Tech when he was a player there, being a coach at Washington State when Graham was starting his coaching career. I think it was an outside receivers coach to start for Mike Leach. Knows the air raid scheme. And not being an offensive line guru, we talked about the hire. Why is Tim Drevno getting promoted and staying on when you're bringing in an air raid scheme? And we were told, oh, it doesn't matter, you're blocking stuff. But it just seemed like those two didn't really see eye to eye. And you're blocking, for one kind of offense and you're running another kind. So to me, this is more about the failure from a couple years ago when, we've talked about it a lot, when you're revamping the staff on the offensive side, you really only had two pieces that were part of the air raid. They only had one receivers coach that year too, which typically you see there's an inside receivers coach and outside receivers coach. I think you have to make the offensive staff. It's great to give Graham Harrell the keys, let him do his stuff, but you have to make the staff shaped like what an air raid staff would be like, and now you're going to get a little more like that. There's some concerns with sack numbers and stuff, what he was seeing at Washington State. I think he's a pretty good recruiter from what I've seen. Definitely a do more with less kind of guy. And there's a bunch of 3-star offensive linemen on the roster right now that I think he's going to have his hands full trying to develop. But there's some good-looking athletes there that I think if he can turn them into the next Elijah Vera Tucker or whatever, I think that's going to be a huge win for USC. So for me, his top job is take the guys you got now and shape them into great offensive linemen for the future. But they need an air raid guy, and they found one in Clay McGuire.
Shotgun, what difference does it make when you actually have an offensive line coach who knows the system you're running as far as air raid?
I mean, it's just the ability to teach. Just to have the set of skills and know exactly what the offense and one of the things that Mike Jinks has said before is speak the same language. Whether it's just the terminology, the verbiage that you use, or if it's just knowing exactly what you're trying to do on each play. Would they toss sweep when you have, student body left, student body right. It's a lot different than a zone blocking scheme like an Alex Gibbs. Alex Gibbs is the godfather of zone blocking offensive line. And, if you're running an offense with zone blocking, you would want someone who knows exactly what you're doing there versus a man-to-man blocking scheme where you're identifying exact people rather than an area where you're trying to block. So I think it's just a big difference. It's kind of like the difference in, teaching a Jim Boeheim 2-3 zone, Syracuse zone defense. Well, if you want to install that defense, do you take someone who just knows how to play man-to-man defense all the time, is really good at teaching about staying in front of guys? No, you want somebody that knows the zone and really knows where you need to rotate, where you need to move, those type of things. It's just knowing that system and having a better fit to be able to teach it to the players.
Yeah.
Now, Ryan, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just real quick, there's not an offensive line guru, but understanding being like when you looked at it, typically for these air raid, these spread schemes, it is more of a zone blocking scheme. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shotgun. And guys are spread out a little more. The splits are a little wider, and guys are taking, their lanes and they're blocking their areas. You're not seeing as much like pulling and things like that where you would have. And I think that was more of a Tim Drevno kind of style. What you're running that pro style kind of offense. They were a little tighter in, and it just you could argue about what the protections were like, but really the run game is where the biggest issue I saw was. And some of it was, you had, Mike Jinks wasn't used to the Marquis Steps of the world being their running backs, but also it just seemed like the way that the splits and stuff were doing, it just wasn't, schematically, it wasn't putting the players in a great position to succeed. So your hope is just running the same sort of concepts that the overall offense is doing, and that's what's being taught by Clay McGuire. It will open up opportunities, even if the players stay at the exact same level. Just the scheme's going to be a little different and should open up some opportunities in the run game and hopefully make the protections a little bit better too.
Yeah, if you're blocking and we'll say the defense stays in the same position regardless of the way you're blocking, and you have some, you're tighter together, then identifying where this guy is and how you're going to block him is much different. If your splits are now here, the offensive line itself is spread out to here. Now you're blocking this guy in a different direction. So teaching that is much different. So it's there are pulling and different things in the zone spread and stuff, but you're not pulling both your backside tackle and your backside guard all the way in front on a sweep. That's a much different type of, you're just so far away. So some of the things is just identifying who should block, and that's something where you're in game and you're teaching as a defense is moving around, like, okay, how do we block this on the next play? And maybe that's something you see improve for USC just because there's going to be a better understanding of what the rest of the offense is trying to do.
Now, Ryan, you alluded to it already, but how fast is McGuire going to have to come in and then try and work the portal? Because they need to fill, I almost said Austin Jackson, Elijah Vera Tucker leaving for the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally you would love to get a left tackle out of the portal. I think, from the sources we've talked to, that's on the agenda. Don't think it's going to be extremely easy. I think they did getting a Drew Richmond in a couple of years ago, playing right tackle. I think that worked pretty well. I mean, he played most of the games. If you can get someone like that, otherwise, I mean, the fact that we know that they're looking, it would bring up some concerns of, hey, who's going to be that guy? There wasn't an heir apparent. And if they don't get someone, and even if they do, it's still going to be Clay McGuire's job to figure out who is going to be, of those young players, who do you think the heir apparent could be? Who has the most upside as your left tackle and protecting, Keaton Slovis? So I think you're going to identify some of those guys, and I think he's going to have to really work to develop them. That's what, one of the things he did a really good job of, developing guys. There's, guys that became all Pac-12 or All-Americans that he coached at Washington State, and they were the kind of bodies that USC recruited maybe the last couple of years. It certainly weren't as highly ranked as an Austin Jackson was or a Chuma Edoga was, but these are the kind of body types that they were recruiting at Washington State. Same guys, not 2-star guys, 3-star guys. So I think it's going to be his job, but they're going to try to find a left tackle in the portal. I just haven't heard. You've heard other positions where they've had guys that they were like targeting, going after. I haven't heard as much with the left tackle. I think it's going to be a little harder to do that, but ideally that's what they'd love to bring in the starting left tackle for 2021.
We talked about Wayne Morris with Chris on Tunnel Vision last week, Shotgun. How much do you think USC just not having an offensive line coach yet impacted his decision?
I mean, that definitely didn't help them, and it depends on there's a lot of things on his side of the situation you don't really know. Is he trying to get in to a spring semester now, so he wanted to make a decision as quick as possible to be able to get enrolled and be at his new school. Those things we don't know, because Drew Richmond, if you remember, didn't come in the spring. He came in the summer and then joined the USC team in the fall. So those might expedite his decision. Whereas if he was planning to wait, then it's not a big deal that USC didn't have their coach now. Whereas he wanted to make his decision quickly, so it didn't help that you don't have the offensive line coach. Now, is he the only guy in the portal? Is he the only one that's going to go in the portal from the beginning of this year? No, there's going to be other guys that are going to fall out of favor with a new coaching staff. You don't feel like you're getting the respect or whatever it may be. You may go in the portal. You may be a starter previously, but you feel like you should be given a spot, and suddenly you're in a competition with a new coach. Who knows? There's different ways that guys end up in the portal. So we'll see if anyone else shakes loose. There's still some other offense tackles that are in there right now. You could also see does someone push up, you want to push up their level of competition from a group of 5 school or even an FCS that's done really well, but you may not know about them. And that's somebody that USC looks for. They did look for a couple of those guys last year. They looked at a couple of smaller school offensive tackles to try to bring in as well.
Now, we thought that was going to be it for coaching turnover, but then there was a report by Adam Rittenberg on Friday. The tight ends coach John David Baker will be leaving for Ole Miss. I was able to confirm that report. It sounded like this was something that USC expected, and they're expected to fill that pretty soon. What I haven't gathered, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on this, if you're USC, do you go with a tight ends coach, or do you try and do what the air raid was supposed to do, where you have an inside receivers coach and then an outside receivers coach? Which direction would you go in, Ryan?
Yeah, so this is a weird one to me, because John David Baker is basically like Graham Harrell's friend, right? They came together. He brought him with him. They promoted him last year. He spent 1 year as an assistant coach in college, and the tight ends really weren't used that much, and Lane Kiffin hires him away. So that's good. I think it shows that someone else sees something in him as a coach potential that Graham Harrell saw in him. But I also felt it was weird. I don't know why you called it a tight ends coach. I think you need to do inside receivers and outside receivers. I know we're getting comments that, dump the air raid and all this kind of stuff. They're running with it. They're going with the air raid. You saw the hire that they made for the offensive line coach. They're fully embracing it. So I think if you want the offense to work at its peak, even if you don't like the scheme, you have to mimic what they've done at other places. And I feel it's inside receivers, outside receivers, those kind of spread offensive concepts. Like, that's what you always see. I don't recall anyone. I don't know all of the staffs, but everyone's staff I've seen, I looked up a bunch of them. Is like inside receivers, outside receivers. So I think it would behoove you to do that. I'm not sure if they just said tight ends coach to try to appease some of the people that don't necessarily on board with the scheme, but I think you have to be all in with it and just find an inside receivers coach to go with Kerry Colbert, because Colbert wasn't he didn't coach those kind of air raid schemes either. So having an experienced like inside receivers coach, and it could work with the tight ends and make them be a better part of the offense, I think would be something beneficial for the offense.
Shadi, what's your take?
I wouldn't be surprised if someone like Seth Doge gets promoted from within that knows the air raid. But yeah, I definitely think that you should have labeled it inside receivers. I think the big issue there is that now recruiting tight ends. Can you actually recruit a guy that is a tight end if you don't have a tight end coach? I think that plays into the naming there, even though I think that the JDB was probably working with those inside receivers just as much as the tight ends. So I think part of it is the optics of it for recruiting and whatnot. So and give credit to JDB that bringing in John David Baker brought in Michael Trigg and Lake McCree, 2 tight ends. So that was part of the reason why he probably had some allure to a guy like Lane Kiffin. I think it's a great move for him to go learn from Lane Kiffin now. I think he's going to have a lot of fun just being in that offensive room with Lane Kiffin and picking his brain on different things.
Mm-hmm. What does that mean for the recruits, though, if you have a guy like JDB leave after you've been recruited by him?
It's the nature of college football. That's why there's been so much emphasis on the potential of a one-time transfer rule, because the saying is always, why do players have to sit out a year but coaches can leave immediately?
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, it makes
I
sense.
mean, we saw that at Texas, right, where all those recruits signed, and they waited to get rid of Tom Herman until after signing day, and then they bring in Sark, and it's like, okay, should those guys be able to get out of their letters of intent? I would think so. If you pull a move like that.
I mean, the ultimate one is the linebacker that ended up at Georgia that had signed with UCLA or was going to sign with UCLA, and Jeff Ulbrich, their linebacker coach, Jim Mora was like, stay on, stay on. The very next day, he's the Atlanta Falcons, linebackers coach or something. So that linebacker got out. I'm blanking on the name right now, but got out of that commitment to UCLA and decided to sign with Georgia. But that's what happens in this game.
Speaking of Jeff Ulbrich, he is the Jets defensive coordinator now, just recently announced, and Hayes Pollard will be working on his defensive staff as a defensive assistant, I believe, or analyst, and so he will be leaving USC. So tie that in. We forgot about that too. There's a lot of random
news.
There's
a lot of stuff
this week.
And Marshall Sherrington getting hired. We didn't mention that. So former USCFootball.com intern and covered Washington high school sports and helped like Brandon Huffman and those guys up there in the Pacific Northwest. Came down here, came to USC, worked for us for a little bit, and then like became a student manager. So we didn't get them that long, but close relationship to a lot of the players down there. Did a great job at Cal. They had their first top 25 class, and he comes back to USC. So really helping out that recruiting staff.
Yep. So heard good things about him. I know Miller Moss was close with him too, right, Ryan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was. I think he did a good job trying to convince him to go to Cal too. But yeah, it's like the Gavin Morrises of the world, like those behind the scenes guys that are doing work. He's definitely one of them. Young, I think he's like 26 years old, 25 years old, something like that.
Yeah.
Huh?
24.
24. Okay.
Young.
Yeah. Young kid, but doing good work. So I think that's a nice hire. And we thought there'd be some turnover on the support staff, and which is good because USC started to build out a better support staff. And then those guys become desirable. Like if you're Chris Hawkins and you get hired as a full time, that's what you want. If someone wants to hire your support staff guy, put him in a higher profile role, I think you're doing a good job of building out the support staff. And we've seen that over the last year and a half or so. They're doing a better job hiring guys to support the entire program.
Yeah.
Not only support staff, but John David Baker. You hire an assistant and someone else hires them away. That's usually a positive sign that you're making good hires.
Monday was the deadline to declare for the NFL draft. One of the guys we hadn't really heard from was Isaiah Pola-Mao. I know we talked about it on the show a lot. He did release a video that he was returning for the 2021 season. Shaka, what does that mean for that defensive back class? Because you have Elijah Griffin leave and Talanoa Hufanga leave. If you have Isaiah Pola-Mao come back, what does that do for that defensive back group?
I think it's really big just because of all the young guys that are coming in. They have 6 DBs. If Eure Wright does sign with USC, the commit from the Army All-American presentation, I guess this year is what it would be, since there was no game. But you have 6 DBs right now that are coming in. So to have that veteran, he's not just an old guy. He's a captain. He's a captain on the defense. So you get one of your captains back. I think that's really big for that defensive back group to be able to try to, let them grow underneath him. And it gives you some more options, I guess, with the safety position. Knowing that you have him back there, you're not replacing 2 safeties at once. You're replacing Talanoa Hufanga's spot, but you also have Greg Johnson and Max Williams who both played the nickel safety spot. So does one of those guys move? Do you bring in one of the young guys? There's some other guys, second and third year guys on the roster. Can somebody step up? But I think just having him, being able to have your center fielder of the defense, the guy that's the very back end, gives you a little bit more confidence. You don't have the playmaker anymore, Talanoa Hufanga, the guy in the box moving around, but Isaiah can help you, save you from having any of those big plays over the top. So getting him back, I think, is big as far as a leadership role, but also on the field as well.
Ryan, any thoughts on that?
No, it's great for Isaiah Pola-Mao. I thought we might hear from more seniors, because basically, and Keely and I talked about this off air. We're going to put up a new scholarship distribution chart. It's basically the same, except the people that left, because nobody moves. No one's class advances. So some of the seniors didn't advance, but we'll need to find out, like maybe some guys are retiring from football and they're not making an announcement that aren't going to the NFL. But we kind of need to figure all that stuff out, it's interesting. I mean, having this weird NCAA rule where no one loses any eligibility just made it kind of strange. Mm-hmm. But I need a little mini rant if I can.
Really?
Yeah.
About what?
This is about the air raid.
Okay, go ahead.
Micah, I need to make a clip out of this. So we have Bucktooth 101 on Periscope. We're not going anywhere until we run the ball. Air raid has never won a natty. All right. Yes, I think USC has to run the football. We've seen successful offenses that throw the ball a whole lot. Clay Helton brought it up after the Arizona game. LSU, in 2019, Alabama every year. They can throw the football a ton, and they can run the football a ton. I don't disagree. USC needs to be able to run the football. Being last in the Pac-12 is unacceptable. It was terrible. It was a terrible rushing year, and it's something that Clay Helton emphasized after they ran the ball pretty well in 2 really close wins against Arizona State and Arizona. But this whole argument about the air raid has never won a natty is stupid. Okay, why? Because how close is USC to winning a national championship? Do you think that if USC switched to some pro-style offense, they're instantly going to win a national championship? No, it's not. USC's offense was the gumbo. It was awful. They needed something. If it was the triple option, I don't care what it was. They needed a single cook in the kitchen to figure out what the offense was going to be. They went with the air raid. It was pretty popular. You're seeing teams score a lot of points, be successful with it. It's not, now they can't run the football. They're never going to win a national championship. You need USC to get to smell the playoff first. So the fact that you're talking about a national championship with the kind of offense they're running, they needed a competent offense to elevate their game from here to here. It looked like it was going to be that way in 2019. They took a step back in 2020. Give them a pass because it's pandemic and all that stuff. But we'll see if they're able to take that step. But I'm not blaming the air raid as the problem for USC's. That's not why they're not in the national championship picture. There's a million other reasons why. And I would say the air raid at least kind of made their offense go from whatever, the 90s up until the top 25 range. At least it was competent. They weren't even competent at that point, and they were running the ball, just not effectively. So, rant over.
Well done. Shotgun, do you have anything to add to that?
Igor asked the question, has the air raid ever won anything of substance of any team? I mean, Oklahoma's been in the playoffs with it. The Joe Brady offense isn't technically an air raid, but it's very spread. I mean, Joe Burrow threw 60 touchdown passes when they won their national championship. So if you're going to say, well, it's the air raid and the style and the schematics of it, you want to say that doesn't work versus, they can't throw the ball for a ton of yards in a game and that's how you win games. Yeah, you can do that too. Nick Saban has said, you don't win games you don't win championships with defense anymore. You win it with offense. And I think Alabama just proved that when they just put on a boatload of points in the playoffs with their offense and Devontae Smith and those guys.
Yeah.
So, is it exactly an air raid? No. It's a spread type system. Other guys, there's going to be principles that kind of bleed in between spread and air raid styles. But yes, you do have to run the ball. It starts with that. You have to be able to do that. You can't be pass only. No offense is ever successful if they only do one thing. The difference is that the air raid under Mike Leach uses the running back as another receiving option. Under Graham Harrell, it's not the same. Those guys are just check down. They're not using them running a bunch of different routes and stuff. They want those guys to be true running backs. So it's similar to a spread style there.
Yeah. They need to run the ball more, for sure. The way he talked about this air raid.
They need to run it successfully.
Right. Yes. They talked about being a 55-45 kind of split and all that stuff. And Scott on Periscope is like, we have a single cook in the kitchen. There's only one item on the menu, and I agree with that. But I don't think that's the way the offense is supposed to be designed. I think they had problems with having an offensive line coach that didn't really know their scheme and all that stuff. You're hopeful that they'll be able to remedy some of that stuff. But they have to run the football. But don't just say the air raid's never. You're not going to win a natty with the air raid. If USC was really successful, they could win a championship with this kind of an offense. But they have to run the football. That is for sure.
That's interesting thing.
Oklahoma in 2017. They had an 1,100-yard runner and a 700-yard runner. In 2018, Kyler Murray ran for 1,000 yards himself, but they also had another 1,000-yard rusher and Trey Sermon, we just saw in the national championship with Ohio State briefly. He ran for 947. So you have two guys that are running for almost 1,000 yards, plus a quarterback that run for 1,000. So if you have to run the ball to be successful, but those teams ran air raids, they made it to the playoffs. One of the reasons why is because they could rely on their run game too. That's the big thing for USC.
I talked to Drake London this week, and I asked him what he's expecting in year 3 of Graham Harrell's air raid, and the phrase he said was more complex, which I thought was interesting. So something to look for next season.
Why is it taking this long then? We installed the offense in 3 days. Then we redid it. And then we redid it, and then we redid it. We just want to get really good at running the same things over and over and over. And that's the whole mindset that Mike Lee Chad was, we can run a play and it doesn't matter. And, Graham Harrell can throw it to Michael Crabtree. It doesn't matter what defense that Texas has. Great, but you need to mix some wrinkles in there. I like watching Oklahoma State's version of the air raid a little bit more just because they'll throw some different wrinkles in there, and they run the ball really successful. Guys like Chuba Hubbard.
Yeah.
I think the difference is you weren't having that complaint after or during the first season. I think it's coming back in year 2 where people have tape not only of the offense but also of Keaton Slovis. Maybe there wasn't enough adjustments in that second season for that adjustment.
And it's more difficult to do it this year with lack of practice time and lack of spring and all those things.
For like a full offensive meeting.
Yeah, so you're trying to install things over Zoom versus on the field.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of different challenges this year.
This should have been a pandemic-proof offense, though. If you can learn it in 3 days, then it shouldn't have been a problem, But
if you're adding complexities, there's
I think they're going
issues.
to now. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know.
And one of the complexities, Jigger Romes. Said, can they do the air raid under center? 4th and 1, doing shotgun doesn't make sense. Hey, that'd be an interesting wrinkle. You could throw in an under center package every once in a while. They're not going to do it, at least not now. But it's something that they could easily do as well.
Ryan, I'm glad you got a warm-up rant in.
Ooh.
And this is why I asked you what you were going to rant about.
Sorry.
Because we haven't talked about Larry Scott yet. The Pac-12 and Larry Scott are parting ways. He's going to leave in June. Your thoughts, Ryan? I know this show in particular has been pretty critical of Larry Scott, and rightfully so.
Yeah. John Canzano came on our podcast of champions, and I love he called him Champagne Larry, and it was it's an awesome nickname. We had a little drop on there. We did a podcast of champions a little earlier, me and David Woods, who kind of went on some rants. But yeah, I think it's something Pac-12 fans were just waiting for. It didn't go down exactly the way I thought. I thought it would be sort of like a mutual parting ways, and I felt like maybe like a year out, but his contract was going to end in the middle of 2022. He's going to get paid, but he'll be gone in June. So it needs to happen. The Pac-12 CEO group will be looking for his replacement, and hearing that John Canzano interviewed all 3 of them. It's the president from Washington State, and Oregon, so it's very Northwestern, focused right now. But that's the kind of they rotate, and that's where the rotation is as far as like the leadership group. But it sounds like they know football, and I think they'll do a pretty good job with that. I'm not sure what direction they're going to go. But Larry Scott, we were trying to put up a Mount Rushmore of all of his gaffes, and for me, it was just about he was so self-serving. It was someone coming from an individual sport like tennis, and really just looking at the Pac-12 as like an ATM, and just made so much money. He was the highest paid commissioner and the lowest production as far as commissioners go. But you look at what he did, putting these lavish San Francisco offices that cost you $7 million a year. The SEC paid like $1 a year for their rent, and the Pac-12 was paying $7 million a year. He was taking luxury suites, private jets, bonuses to his support team until while furloughs were going on. There was just so much that he was Champagne Larry. And he wouldn't even talk to the athletic directors. It was more of a monarchy where he just made these decrees, and he had the support of the CEOs, the Pac-12 presidents and chancellors. But then they started to fall off, and the ADs would keep complaining to their presidents over the years, and they're like, "Oh, it's Larry." And then then more of them are complaining, and more of them complaining. Then the last couple of years, you saw him actually talk to ADs. It was too little, too late at that point. But he didn't listen to anyone. He didn't listen to his own staff. He just made his decisions, and it was sort of like he was close early on. It was a pretty good television deal for a couple of years, and then it was awful for the last decade or so. It really was these close decisions that he made early on that you thought like, wow, this looks better. He was doing a better job early than Tom Hansen, but overall, if you just let Tom Hansen do things, you might have adapted better to the current landscape than what Larry Scott did. Maybe the biggest gaffe to me is the Pac-12 network. I mean, what were they focused on? When you're making a big deal, you're making a big decision, whoever it is, you have like the kind of ideas in your head of what it needs to be. He was so focused on the Olympic sports, putting on, 860 live events per year, stuff that would be great for web content. You don't need an extra network for that. He put a network in every region. Oregon State and Oregon have their own network, and you could watch a volleyball game from 3 years ago. What is the point of that? John Wilner did a report on this as far as the actual ratings, because the Pac-12 network wouldn't release it. He got down into the down and dirty with people that do ratings. That some of these things would actually have a zero, like literally nobody watching these things. And so it was harder on distribution. Here's 7 networks you got to put on DirecTV. They're like, go pound sand. And he just didn't focus on what you needed to focus on, which was the major sports and get it in distribution to where people can watch it. You're talking about national college football writers that can't get the Pac-12 network. You can't get it in Southern California. It wasn't on any basic cable packages. It was just terrible. The distribution was bad. And what you focused on was putting on all these live events nobody watched. So it cost all this money. He made it a media company and doubled his salary. It's not a media company. So everything's on the table for his replacement. They're probably going to move the networks. I mean, the offices out of San Francisco, put it somewhere in a suburb somewhere. You've got to do something with the Pac-12 network. They're going to get a new TV deal. So there's a lot of things that he really screwed up that you got to fix. And maybe the one that people don't talk about enough, the whole Willie Dixon stuff and the officiating, it's awful. And that's sort of like the landscaping around your house, as far as like that's what people look at the Pac-12. Man, the referee, the officiating is so bad. And the director of officiating that they hired this last time, he's got 2 games of experience or something, like officiating in the MAC in like the 90s. Like that's all he's got. So the decisions that have still been bad. And whoever the new commissioner is going to have to come in, similar to what the athletic director for USC had to do, come in and really just reverse so many of the bad decisions that were made. Maybe he started off on the right trajectory. There was some cool stuff early on, but it's been bad for a long time, to the detriment of all of the Pac-12 programs and USC especially.
Mm-hmm. Woody Dixon, Ryan, that's who you're
Who
referring to.
did I say?
Willie.
Well, I'm sorry, Woody Dixon. My bad.
Shotgun, I know
who was
you
a
have
conference lawyer that overruled the on-field referees and then the replay referees on a play USC Washington State a couple years ago.
Yes. Shotgun, I know you have a lot of thoughts. You said it on the Family Feud podcast. Plug. Anything else you want to add before we move into questions?
I think that I'll try to be quick with this. If you guys want my expanded thoughts, go to the Family Feud podcast. It seemed a lot of people enjoyed that one. But I'll try to be quick with and just look at what was listed in the press release as his accomplishments. So this is what he was supposed to have done really, really well. He helped deliver changes that transformed the conference into a modern 12-team league. Okay, you can give him a little bit of that, getting Utah and Colorado, except you missed out on Texas and Oklahoma, and you had to settle. So you're settling, so that's an accomplishment, your settlement. Institutions agreed to equal revenue sharing for the first time. Well, that's great if you're in Corvallis or Pullman, not so much if you're USC or UCLA. You're giving up a bunch of money to help support Washington State and Oregon State. So not really great for USC there. Created 2 football divisions. They don't even align geographically. This is one of my biggest pet peeves. Don't call it the North and then have 2 teams that are farther south in Cal and Stanford than Utah and Colorado are. Come on, at least get your geography correct here. He helped lay the foundation for a strong valuation of those rights in the next round of negotiations. So this TV rights helped this strong valuation, lay that foundation by not winning any championships in the major sports. So if USC or, if the Pac-12 was coming off 3 of the last 5 national championships in football, that valuation is going to be a lot better. That foundation is going to be a lot stronger. So that's an accomplishment for him again here. The Pac-12 networks, and Ryan, you're talking a little bit about this, how objectives went beyond revenue generation to emphasize exposure for women's and Olympic sports, which you can debate whether that should be the correct way to do it. The problem I have with this saying that is except if you wanted to be exposed to any of those athletes outside your local area, or if you had DirecTV, there was not more exposure. You gave up money by not getting on DirecTV, but then you did not give the exposure to those players. For one, the quality of broadcast was terrible at times. For two, you would have great matchups in certain sports where it'd be volleyball. There's some great volleyball or soccer games that could be put on the Pac-12 networks. You know, I cover college baseball, and Oregon State's number 1 in the country, UCLA's number 3. Is that game on TV? No. What the hell? How are you getting more exposure for these people? Why are you not to go out and get the money then? You know, be a money grab if you're not actually going to give exposure. And the last two, if adopting a new logo is listed as a key milestone during your 11-year tenure, I mean, I don't even know what to say there. You know, that's one of his accomplishments. And the last one was that he launched major initiatives in Asia, China, except there was never any build-up to those events to grab national attention. When I brought it up, Keely and on the Family Feud, Keely and Chris looked at me like, what are you talking about? No one even knew that there was an initiative. So if those are your accomplishments, Larry Scott, then it's good riddance that you're gone. You know, it was not only that, like Ryan said, he comes from an individual sport background, and it was all about him. He increased the prize money in the WTA. That was one of his big accomplishments when he was working in tennis. And that's what it felt like he was doing in the Pac-12. He was increasing his own prize money. He's going to end up getting paid around $50 million. And those are the accomplishments that he had, the ones I just listed.
Ryan?
Yeah. No, it's correct. He was awful, terrible, not good. Yeah. So the Pac-12 needs to move on, and they're going to do that now. So I'm glad they're doing it. I mean, they could have done it. They shouldn't have extended him in 2017. He gets an extension in 2017, sends out this video and makes a big deal about it in the Pac-12 offices about there's this big announcement. Everyone's like, wow, you're going to get DirecTV or this is going to be great. And it's like, I was extended. I'm getting $5 million a year. And everyone's like, yeah, great, Larry. I mean, the head of the networks lives in my neighborhood. He's in Hermosa Beach or something. Would fly up to San Francisco every week. And that's the kind of weird crap that was going on here. They didn't make a lot of money. They wasted a ton of money. He gave a range of what he thought the Pac-12 networks would make for each school. And I think it was supposed to be 7 to 10 million, or the low end was supposed to be 7 million, something stupid like that. Every school gets 1.5 million. I don't even know if that's the number. Andy Staples does a great job with The Athletic, does a podcast, had John Wilner on, and he said, so every school, this is a great way to put it, every school in the Pac-12 makes per year on the Pac-12 network, their conference network, they get $1.5 million, equivalent to about the offensive line coaching salary in an average SEC school, which is freaking baffling when you talk about that. So that's what the schools make off this stupid network that Larry created. I think it was great to have a network. Wholly owning it was a huge mistake. And he's saying, oh, it's going to be great in 2024. No, it's not. You need to sell it to ESPN or Fox. Let them run it. You know why? Because they're media companies. That's what they do. You are not a media company. You were getting paid like you were a media company, had horrible distribution, had horrible programming, didn't do it right. So, yeah, it's a problem, and hopefully it's going to be remedied here going forward.
Ryan rant. Well done. Well done. And a shotgun rant, too, I guess.
We both have some rants.
That's true. I'm going to jump into a caller. It's our buddy Dave from Iowa, and then I'll jump into questions. I know you guys have a lot of questions, so we'll get into that. Sorry, it's almost the top of the hour.
First off, Boone had the greatest question. Was Larry Scott the great conference commissioner or the greatest conference commissioner? It's a valid question.
I'm not following? Okay.
The greatest conference commissioner, obviously.
Sure.
The greatest, yeah. He's awful. The worst conference commissioner we've ever seen.
Moving on to our caller. Dave from Iowa, hello. You're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey, Tunnel Vision, Dave from Iowa once again. First off, just to annoy a shotgun, with that 5-star cornerback commit, I'm pretty sure Todd Orlando is going to be changing the base package on defense to the dime package since we have so many DBs. But my question is, or my response to shotgun in terms of his offensive lineman rant earlier, the reason why us USC fans are so annoyed that there isn't an offensive line commit, so to speak, is because we actually care about the offensive line and the line of scrimmage compared to USC. Ryan, why do you think SEC offensive linemen or offensive line coaches make $1.5 million a year or something like that? Because the head coaches and the team itself cares about the trenches. So in order for us to win games and actually get shit done, we needed focus on the line of scrimmage, which starts with the offensive line. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
A little rant from Dave there.
Yeah, we got a little Dave rant. We're not disputing that's the, but you can't equate to USC got a 5-star cornerback commit and saying, oh my God, they're just abandoning the offensive line. Like, that's not the case. They do have to get better on the offensive line. That's why they fired Tim Drevno. They shouldn't have had him be the offensive line coach from 2 years ago. We ranted about this. We talked about this. This has been a problem for a while. The offensive line is a problem. They've got guys, you're going to have 2 years in a row of guys going in the first round from the offensive line. And it's still, overall, the performance was bad. That's not good. So, yes, it's acknowledging that USC signed got a commit from a 5-star DB for the class of 2022 does not equate to we think that you don't need offensive linemen. That's just not the case.
I mean, shit, guys. We should just stop even reporting about anybody that's not an offensive lineman. Isaiah Pola-Mao doesn't matter, not an offensive lineman.
Yeah.
You got Katie Nixon, doesn't matter, not an offensive lineman. 5 stars, doesn't matter. Corey Foreman, not an offensive lineman. Forget about it.
I feel like we've started cussing on this show, and I don't know how to feel about it. That's my 2 cents.
Well, Shotgun followed up with Dave's.
Yeah, that's true. Whatever works.
I think you could say those words on Nickelodeon now or something. So.
No, I don't think you can.
But Comedy Central.
They did during the football game.
Yeah, I was about to say, unless there's a football game on, then maybe.
Comedy Central.
No, I think the offensive line is really important, but you can't downplay a 5-star cornerback and get the impact of that commitment because it's not an offensive lineman. They need to do better on the offensive line. I've said that for 4 years now.
Yeah.
The guys that they've missed out on. You just look at it and you salivate at the names of Penei Sewell and Jackson Carman and even Jonah Tuanau and Sean Ryan. Like, these are legit left tackles, and that's why you struggle so much to find a left tackle. And you're like, okay, can Elijah Vera Tucker and that's great that he was able to move over there, but now you're back in the same spot of wondering, rather than having a guy that you groomed and is ready to come in and be a 3-year starter or something. The offensive line has to get better. We'll see what changes come when Clay McGuire is officially announced as the offensive line coach and where this line can go. I think it's really big for them to be able to get spring football in.
Yeah.
And to be able to work with a new coach, but also second year, what's going to change if you're going to add some new stuff to the offense. I think spring football is really big for them. Didn't have that last year when they were moving everyone around. So it's going to be big for these guys to get more time playing the positions they're going to play, which no one on the line except for Nealon was able to do that coming into last season's fall camp.
Yeah.
They lost one of those guys to UCLA, like Chip Kelly, who doesn't even like to recruit. Like they picked UCLA over USC. Like they did a poor job.
Interestingly, that's part of the reason why Sean Ryan. That was his recruitment. He wanted to not be recruited, kind of.
Yeah.
That was his personality.
Whatever works.
But you got to know the personality.
You got to figure it out.
You got to be able to do that.
Jumping into questions, we had a question from Teresa on YouTube who said, who was instrumental in Domani Jackson's commitment?
Dante Williams.
Obviously Dante Williams, but don't negate the connections that he's a ground zero guy. He's a modern day guy, so you got some of those guys who recruit him as well, but he's also a ground zero guy. Armand Hawkins Jr., worked with ground zero previously, so he knows those guys. They have relationships. Gavin Morris has had a relationship with Domani Jackson, coming up and visiting USC. So there's a lot of connections there, and those are the type players where you need to build those connections early. Corey Foreman, USC's known about him for multiple years, so pretty much the entire staff has been talking to him and has a relationship with him, and that's how they were able to land a guy like that.
Hey, we got some breaking news on Periscope.
Really?
Yeah, this is a big deal. Mr. Wei Wan says, I get Pac-12 International in Taiwan, but Taiwan sports media broadcasts only Olympic sports. So Mr. Wei Wan, he gets to watch the Pac-12 network in Taiwan. We can't watch it here in Los Angeles. So that's just so that's where Larry Scott was putting, focusing on. So I'm glad you could watch it, sir. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you for the breaking news, Ryan. AKA Boone says, what are the chances that Henry To'oto'oto, don't know if I said that right, comes to USC? Day one starter here. Would he end up at a Alabama or Ohio State?
Yeah, I think USC's throwing that life preserver at the Tennessee boat that's sinking right now and trying to pick up any scraps from that trend. But he's definitely one that USC recruited out of high school. So we'll see. I think there's a chance. I haven't seen any specifics on it, but it's certainly someone that I think USC's targeted. Have you guys heard anything?
I just got a mental image of, the Vol Navy and USC's out there with their boat on the river throwing out.
We'll save you.
Wasn't there a boat that caught on fire like 2 years ago? Something like that?
I think so.
That's a very good
omen.
Yeah, for Tennessee. But yeah, Henry Toto is one of the guys that USC's pushing hard for. He's from De La Salle. Obviously, Michael Hutchings went to De La Salle as well. He has a connection with him. So USC is trying to pull him in. USC, initially, he cut his list down coming out of high school to 3 teams, and that was Alabama, Tennessee, and Washington. USC and Oregon were both in the mix at the end to get his final official visit, and he ended up not taking that on the final weekend, but USC was in the mix for him there. So they were one of the teams that were still vying for him. Obviously, USC has some openings in the linebacker spots, potentially, depending on, there's going to be some competitions there for sure, depending on who's healthy. And he's a guy that would come in. You've seen the ability, if you watched any Tennessee football, his ability to read and react is really big there. I think he would come in and be a starter right away, even regardless of who's healthy, just what he's shown in college versus anyone else on the USC roster. So that's a guy USC is definitely going after, but Alabama's going to be in that mix as well, and a couple other schools too.
A comment we got on Facebook was if USC is having a Washington State air raid type of offense, you're going to eventually start to recruit those type of players. And the person on Facebook basically said, shouldn't USC be trying to mimic teams that have won at greater levels rather than Washington State?
Yeah, and I don't think Graham Harrell ever said that that's what they wanted to run. I mean, it sounds like from what he was describing, it sounded like it was supposed to be a little bit more like what Oklahoma runs without like he hasn't really been – we haven't seen, like, the mobile quarterback aspect of it. And some of that, too, I think hurts the run game. Gerard talks about this a lot. If you're going to do some of those zone read sort of concepts, which can be very effective when you see Oklahoma or, Texas Tech, whatever, when they're doing that kind of stuff, we saw them do that, and you can really open up some stuff in the running game. But when the quarterback's never going to run the football, that definitely makes it less – effective. So my thought, just from what he was describing, it was going to be you're going to run more than what you would see from Mike Leach, but you weren't necessarily going to have the mobile quarterback or have the quarterback be a big running threat in the offense. So that might open up things more. But maybe he would do that. But he loved Keaton Slovis, and that they're not going to subject him to running the football like you'd see like a Kyler Murray or something.
It's a read option, but it's not a read option with a quarterback. So the option is for the quarterback to throw the quick screen. So there was a video that was posted on the P of Steve Sarkisian talking about the Alabama offense. And he said, there's 2 ways to go about it. You can do it with a running quarterback, and your quarterback is going to be the runner as the secondary option, or your quarterback's going to stay in the pocket and he's going to throw the quick screen, which they did frequently to a guy like Devontae Smith with Tua Tagovailoa or with Mac Jones this year. It didn't matter. They were going to keep that guy in the pocket. So the read option isn't necessarily that the quarterback has to take off. Now, you can tag that on and say, hey, they're crashing down. Let's get one on a 3rd and short or a 4th down. Just make sure you slide and get down or whatever. But there's 2 different ways to go about the read option. And so USC's way about it, Graham Harrell, is to throw the screen out to the wide receivers on the backside versus the quarterback taking off around the weak side.
We had a question from Mike on Facebook who says, when do you think USC will get one of the top running backs in the country?
When they show they can run the ball. They're not going to get one in the 2021 recruiting class, but if they suddenly come out and they're running for a bunch of yards, you can pick up a guy. Oklahoma has had some big recruits. Oklahoma State has had some big recruits in this style of offense, so it's possible. And one thing I wanted to go back to was talking about the Washington State offense. Joe Brady's offense was a little different than anything else before, and it did really well. So, you can't just follow exactly, the game of football is constantly evolving, so you have to change some things. Now, can Graham Harrell change some things to make his offense a little bit more successful?
FP on YouTube says he actually wants us to fill in the blank. He says, if I were Pac-12 commissioner, I would ...
Get rid of the regional networks for the Pac-12 and sell it to Fox or ESPN and get it instantly on so people could watch it. I think it's the most important thing. You can focus on the major sports and you can get people to watch your network. That would help a lot.
The first thing, you're incorrect, Ryan. The first thing you do is you go and you stand on a table, you filibuster if you have to, at a college football playoff meeting and say, we want 8 teams and we want an automatic bid.
Yeah.
Because without getting in the college football playoff, it just doesn't matter. You're losing so much money there, revenue-wise, but just exposure-wise and respect-wise. Because USC hasn't been really good. The Pac-12 hasn't been good. They haven't had a team in the college football playoff since 2016.
I'm looking at the referee budget and upping that sucker to get the best refs. That's what
I made a comparison to do you remember when we talk about the USC where the athletic department was just decades of incompetence, but they knew it. They knew they weren't doing things right, and they never wanted to bring someone from the outside in because someone from the outside would come in and go, "Wow, you guys are incompetent." And so they never wanted that. They would only hire people that they knew, that didn't know what was going on. I feel like that's the way with the Pac-12 referees. They didn't go, they knew there was a problem, and they go out and hire this guy that has only been a referee a couple times in his life, 2 decades ago, because they didn't want to expose all the issues. I think you have to have someone come in. It's a similar thing. You have to come in and look, our referees are incompetent. Fix it. Come in and just bring in someone from the outside that can see what the problem is. I feel like it's a parallel to USC's administration and what's going on with Pac-12 referees.
I think it's the same thing with the hiring of the commissioner. You want to take the USC rules that Ryan has established. No one can know the fight song, so I don't know if no one can know the pate or whatever is in San Francisco that Larry Scott's been eating. No caviar, no champagne.
If you're in the same wine club as Larry Scott, you cannot get hired.
So one of the candidates that's been thrown out, I think, is the WCC commissioner who previously worked under Larry Scott, and I was like, no, can't do it, can't do it. Needs to be complete, sever the ties, no connections at all. Sorry for that person. They can't be a candidate because of Larry Scott.
Yeah.
In that sense, Rick on Facebook says, who do you guys want? Who would you pick for next commissioner?
Yeah, I talked about it with David Woods a little bit. He was like, do you really want an athletic director? So you got Greg Burns at Alabama. He was in the Pac-12. He was at Arizona. But you kind of need someone that's basically can run can negotiate TV contracts. That's really going to be the big thing. And I don't think that's necessarily an athletic director. So do you want really a sitting athletic director? Was it Gene Smith from Ohio State? I kind of would rather get a commissioner from somewhere else that's maybe been a commissioner before, or you go to an ESPN and you get who's the president of ESPNU, or someone that works in television that you could kind of bring in and run things. And I think they would make that TV network stuff go a lot smoother, and that should be a trickle down effect to everything else.
Shotgun?
No, this guy's wrong over here in this other room. No, that's what Larry Scott was supposed to. He had experience with TV deals with the WTA.
Not a tennis thing.
So
ESPN
still
or Fox.
experience with it. No, you need someone that knows the college athletic landscape. Now, can you get someone that does both? Now, there's where you're talking, and that's where I think Oliver Luck was the first name that came to mind for me. He's been an athletic director, but he's also commissioner of the XFL. He has a very high reputation in sports as well. And another guy that USC fans have thrown out, and it's not a terrible idea, is David Baker, who runs the Pro Football Hall of Fame, because he has connections. He was Sam Baker's father, the offensive lineman at USC, but he played in Southern California, played basketball at UC Irvine. He's been a politician before, so he knows how to talk his way to smooth things over with everyone. But he was also the Arena League commissioner. And I thought that was really interesting because the Arena League took off when he was the commissioner. That's when it was really popular. He was able to get fans there, and that's something the Pac-12 really needs. Get fans, but also get eyeballs, and that includes TV deals and stuff there. So that might be intriguing, maybe a little bit outside the box, but I think that's a good candidate as well.
Ryan, do you have a rebuttal, or shall I move on?
No, we can move on. I think both those guys would be good. Oliver Luck having some commissioner experience, David Baker as well. David Baker was great to talk to when his son was playing here. He was really fun. He is a mountain of a man.
6'9", 400 pounds.
He is freaking huge, and you shake his hand, and your hand would just disappear. And I got pretty big hands. I'm man, but the nicest guy in the world. So I think he would do. You just kind of just trust people sometimes, and I think you trust a guy like that. I think he would do a good job.
Interesting. Okay.
You can also farm out the TV rights negotiations. That's another option. I don't know if that's ideal for the Pac-12, but that's something you can do. You can hire an outside firm to take care of that.
So Mark Watkins on YouTube has some questions about USC's expected offensive line hire. He says, McGuire's an air raid O-line coach, but is he a good air raid O-line coach? Texas State's O-line stats were bad. Washington State's O-line got a lot better after he left, and he couldn't get a better job than Texas State the last 2 years.
I wouldn't say that the Washington State offensive line got better. Their sack numbers got better. He did develop guys and make, there's guys that are in the NFL that he coached and stuff and turned into all Pac-12 players that really weren't heralded. So I think it's sort of a mixed bag. You have to, I look more at what was happening at Washington State. It is a little, I don't know all the details behind, what happened with Texas State and that. So, and why he was doing there. But I think there's some good numbers there too. It's not just bad numbers from him that you're quoting. The offensive line didn't get significantly better, but they did give up less sacks when he left.
Yeah, sack numbers often are tied to how quickly you're getting the ball away in the air raid system as well. So, Gardner Minshew versus Luke Falk, you might have one guy that holds on the ball or one guy that can escape a little bit more, and suddenly the sack numbers change a lot.
D. Diego on YouTube said, why did the offensive line under Tim Darnell work in the air raid in 2019?
I don't think it did. I mean, J.T. Daniels got
5 quarterbacks come out.
Yeah, how many times did the quarterbacks get hurt? So I wouldn't say it worked.
Shotgun?
I would let that. I'm just going to let that one go.
Okay.
I mean, you pretty much answered it. I mean, there are some positive things.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the things that hurt USC this year was that second year and people having more tape and, being able to identify how to attack it a little bit better than necessarily the offensive line was great this year. It wasn't great this year. And having Austin Jackson and Elijah Vera Tucker beside each other definitely wasn't a bad thing either in 2019.
Ben Jen says, can you guys comment on the Northwest schools being in charge of the commissioner hire? Why are the South schools not involved?
It's rotation, right? Like it's the
I don't
leadership
know the
group.
exact answer, Ryan. You were saying that, and Chris was saying something on the Family Feud podcast as well, a little bit different, but add a fourth one, add a USC or UCLA, add a California school at least. I mean, it just feels like that there needs to be someone in a major media market. I mean, Seattle is a major media market, but the other two are the two most desolate places in the conference. So, I think that there needs to be better representation for the Pac-12 South, but in particular California, whether that be, Stanford or Cal being Pac-12 North teams, doesn't matter there. I think that, you need to have someone from California.
Yeah, that's the leadership group, but it does change. But I feel like this is going to be a thing where you do have to consult. It's not just going to be those three. Like you have to consult some of the California ones as well.
You would think that, but you just came from a commissioner who should have been consulting with people as well. And did that ever happen?
No, he never consulted. He made decrees.
A.K.A. Boone on YouTube says, how many scholarships are left for transfers/recruits?
It's hard for us to know because, like Ryan said, are there going to be more USC players transfer out? Are there seniors? And there was a good question that I don't know the answer to, and I'll try to find out for maybe next week. But Mark asked, do seniors that transfer in, like Katie Nixon, count against the 85 scholarship limit? Or are they exempt too, like the returning seniors? That's a great question. I got to figure out the answer on that one. So maybe it doesn't matter that Katie Nixon is transferring in, or if you get another grad transfer this offensive lineman, because those guys technically won't count.
Yeah, I had Colorado people ask me about that, about Katie Nixon's scholarship and how that would work. And I asked a USC source, and they said it was a unique situation. I didn't get the full story yet, but it's not going to be what we usually know, I believe. So I thought it was interesting that the Colorado people were curious about that. So
yeah, it's an initial counter for sure when you get a transfer, but is it an overall counter? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. We had a question from Coley who says, now that it's the off season, does Coach Helton have less meetings with the press, or is it a once a week type of thing?
Way less. We probably don't hear from him. He did a LA Times thing. We can put requests in. We don't necessarily get them, but we probably won't hear from him until early February for the signing
Probably
period.
signing day, yeah.
Someone listening to the show, a USC source just texted in to say that they do count.
Oh, yes. I got that as well.
So they're an initial counter, or an overall counter.
Overall counter, I believe.
Leonard on YouTube said, what do you guys think will be the biggest improved unit and the biggest weakness of this team next year?
I think the offensive line and the running game is going to improve. I think the fit is going to be better, the terminology and all the stuff that we talked about earlier. But I think having spring ball, is really undervalued for this group. With the fact that you had 4 different guys moving to different positions last year, I think that really hurt them not having that spring ball. I think it will be invaluable for them this year. So I think since you still have several older guys, as of now, they're planning to come back as far as we know, then I think an extra year, the experience they got this year, but then having that spring ball experience with a new coach, I think the run game will improve. I think that's one of the areas where you'll see a big jump.
Ryan?
What are you saying Shotgun is going to have the biggest problem? What was the
biggest weakness?
The weakness.
The biggest weakness could still be the offensive line.
I was going to say.
I wanted to say the same thing. I want to say offensive line, could be improved, but still the biggest weakness, and maybe with the linebackers too. I don't know. I'm not sure at this point. I think schematically the offensive line is going to be better, but I think there's still going to be some issues.
Dave on YouTube says, why is Graham Harrell so predictable in his game planning?
I mean, if you have a small, simple playbook, there's less you can do, I guess. It's an execution-based offense, and there's not as many options. It's really thin. I think it's a really thin playbook. If you can install it in 3 days, it's not that complicated.
In the same vein, a.k.a. Boone on YouTube says, with an air raid coach coming in and the O-line playing wider, will SC finally stop bunching up on run plays and telegraphing their run plays?
So
we'll see. The bigger issue I have with that is not running the stuff that is counter. The play action off that, the waggle type of play, different things that you can do where you show the run, and then you give them a pass or you give a different type of run, a sweep or something different than what has been. It's just more creativity, it seems like would be advantageous for them in those type of situations.
Maria on Facebook wants to know if we know anything about 2021 and fans.
No.
Nothing as of now.
No.
I mean, we'll see where we're at, as a county, as a city, as a state, as a nation,
as a world.
Yeah. I didn't even realize this. So
mostly just to a nation. Some of the rest of the world is doing all right.
But I think we got to worry about California too, because you could see the Kansas City game. Oh, there's fans in the stands, but if the Rams were playing, they wouldn't have fans. The Lakers are not. But I didn't even realize this. So Santa Clara County, remember when Stanford had to play out of state for football, and the 49ers had to go to Arizona. And when USC got their game with Stanford canceled, Shotgun's saying and they play in Santa Cruz. And I'm like, no, they play in Santa Clara. And he's like, no, they're still not allowed to. I'm like, they're still not allowed? So they're still not allowed to even have any kind of gatherings to have a sporting event in Santa Clara County. So it's definitely a TBD. But I think the first thing you want to worry about is, can you have a regular spring football? That would be a good step if early April USC can have a regular spring football.
I don't see why they wouldn't, because it feels like less risk, and they've done it once before, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Shotgun, on the topic of basketball, do you want a basketball minute?
USC's basketball team is coming home. They've got a big week with Oregon State. So they just lost to Oregon State at Oregon State last week in a makeup game. As Ryan was saying, they then had to cancel a game or postpone a game on Thursday because they got a false positive. And Andy Enfield talked about the situation yesterday after the Cal game. USC won at Cal and may have seen the emergence of Evan Mobley to becoming a superstar, much more aggressive in that game. We'll see if that continues or not, but possibly there. Make sure you're watching Evan Mobley. He's not going to be here long, and he is special. But in that, Andy Enfield was pretty upset about the situation with Stanford because they got a false positive. He said, we all knew it was a false positive. We were sure because they had taken – he said they had taken 2 PCR tests and 4 antigen tests on their road trip, basically. So they had tested negative over and over leading up to this and had a player test positive. They were not able to get a rapid test done before the game could be played, which at USC they would have been. So this is why it came up that they're in Santa Cruz. Maybe it's because they're in Santa Cruz. Not exactly sure, but and then USC offered, hey, we can play on, when they got things cleared up, they were like, and got the test result back, the PCR later that it was negative, said to Stanford, hey, we can play on Friday, we can play on Sunday, we can play on Monday before we head back. Let's do Monday. That makes sense. We can play early. You guys are playing Saturday. We're playing Saturday. Neither one of them played till Thursday. And Stanford was like, nah, I think we're good. I don't think we really need to play this week. And it comes out that Stanford was missing 3 starters when they upset UCLA on Saturday. So maybe that played into it. Andy Enfield was not very happy about the situation. But now USC, if they're to make up that game, is going to have to fly up to the Bay Area for, on a Tuesday or something. So it's a weird, wacky year, and they're trying to make the best of it. So, USC has played really, really good at times. They've played not so good at other times. But they're second in the Pac-12 right now, right behind UCLA, and they still got a couple of games to go against the Bruins. So an interesting team to watch. They're in position right now to make the NCAA tournament. If they take care of business, they'll be there.
Offensively, why do you think it's been so inconsistent lately?
Because, like I talked about with Evan Mobley, they need him to be a little bit more aggressive. They need him to be a guy that takes charge every once in a while, and that's not the personality that he has. So he will, if teams double team him, he'll kick it to the right guy. And if USC doesn't shoot well from outside, then they really struggle. That's been the biggest difference. Their scoring when they win versus lose is like a 25-point difference. And their shooting percentage on three-pointers is like a 15 or 20% difference when they win and lose. So it comes down to that. And when their outside shooters are making shots and getting Ethan Anderson, their point guard, back last week, is going to help them just, have an extra playmaker there. So Evan Mobley is a very unselfish big man, but occasionally you need him to be a little bit more aggressive, and he was that against Cal. Scored a career-high 25 points, and he knocked down, I think it was 10 of 13 from the free throw line. So, he had a big game, and we'll see if he can carry it forward going into this week.
Keely, strike. You just gave him a follow-up basketball question, like, boom, 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 boom.
I'm sorry. This way.
You're talking about the potential number 1 overall pick in the NBA draft, Ryan.
Yeah, come on, Ryan.
Yeah, we're talking about football.
Potential number 1 overall pick.
Come on.
Okay. Yeah.
Facebook, if you want to get any last-minute questions, then do so. I am looking at your comment section. Walker Lambert on YouTube says, which player are the 3 of you most excited about heading into next season?
Huh.
Yeah.
Maybe Solomon Poo-Poo.
We got a question about that.
Yeah, maybe
Someone wanted to know how his rehab is going. Leonard did.
Last we heard it was going well, so hoping for the best for him, but I'm not going to get excited about him until I see a full week practice.
It's true.
I think I went over
That's
this one
the
before.
Rule. Yep, that's the solo rule.
Corey Foreman is going to be interesting. I think it's exciting to see what he can do in USC's offense, but I think the most intriguing player maybe is going to be Keaton Slovis. How does he bounce back? Is he going to be a legit Heisman candidate like people thought he would be, and a potential first-round pick? Or, is there struggles? Is there questions about the arm, the mental, all that stuff? I think that he's going to bounce back, and I think with the spring ball and all those things, and maybe they add some creativity, I think he'll have a big year next year. So he's an intriguing player for me.
I'm going to cheat and say a position group. I'm really excited about the wide receivers just to see them play. I think it's a fun group between Drake London and Bru McCoy, how physical they play. And then Kyle Ford, I was told he's doing well in his recovery. So I think that's an intriguing group to watch just because wide receivers are fun in that sense.
And if USC can somehow find a way to get Gary Bryant the ball in some space like the Kansas City Chiefs did tonight with Tyreek Hill. Watched a couple of those plays and I was just like, if USC could do that with Gary Bryant, that could be the same type of playmaker you could see.
Leonard on YouTube said, do you guys think Sam Darnold will improve under a new head coach?
Sure.
Yep.
That was quick.
And it's a defensive head coach, but still.
Mm-hmm. FB on YouTube said, when will the conference realize the importance of revenue-generating sports like football and men's basketball?
I mean, I think they're starting to get it now. I think even Larry Scott started to get it, in the last couple of years. He just didn't focus on it because that wasn't what what the Pac-12 was good at. But you're hurting those Olympic sports and the non-revenue sports by having your revenue sports be poorer too. So it's not good for the conference as a whole. So I think they kind of get it now, and I think the CEO group is going to try to find someone that will focus on that more.
That's what I was going to ask you. The presidents, do you think they understand what they need in a commissioner now that they've had to endure Larry Scott, if you will?
I think so. Canzano did an interview with the 3, Pac-12 CEOs from the Northwest that, they seem like they get football. They understand the importance a lot more. And I think everything's on the table. So they realize their shortcomings. The fact that you're getting rid of this guy, you're going to pay him another, $7.5 million or something to go away. I think that's a big deal.
I think Schill really gets into Oregon, the Oregon president, because you've seen the emphasis on those programs at Oregon as well.
Mm-hmm. Alrighty. Any final thoughts, gentlemen, before we wrap this one up?
A lot of news.
I know.
There's a lot of
Hopefully we
news
covered it
today.
all.
Yeah, I mean, we forget things like, oh yeah, Katie Nixon transferred in.
Yeah.
And all this. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. There'll still be some stuff going on. Where are they going to hire as far as a tight end coach? Promote from within, bring someone from the outside. Is there going to be any more support staff? Turnover. They still need to hire a few people to replace some people that have left on the recruiting support staff. So, any other, maybe some bigger names too, like we saw Marshall get hired and things like that. So there's still a lot of stuff going on. And stay tuned for some interviews and stuff up on uscfootball.com. Make sure you check it out. We got new stuff going up every day, all the time, almost every hour. And make sure you check out the Peristyle. The message board is still going off. A lot of upset USC fans, and it will continue that way for the foreseeable future.
Going off is the right description. Shotgun, final thoughts?
Yeah, people ask us, like, oh, what are you doing now that football season's over?
Like, it doesn't stop.
Still, USC football, there's still constantly, there's going to be recruiting news, there's going to be, the hirings and firing process, and then hopefully as we get towards April, when there's, they're scheduling spring ball, hopefully we'll be able to be out there covering the team and seeing what they're doing as well. That's a big hope, but, that's the hope, the wish, and the dream. Basketball is still going on, and baseball is about to start up, and I think USC baseball is going to be good again this year as well.
Interesting. Alrighty, that's going to wrap it up for a meaty Tunnel Vision. We had a lot to cover. That's Ryan. That's Shotgun. I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next Sunday. Bye.